The subway car was packed tighter than usual on this Tuesday morning. Commuters clutched their coffee cups and newspapers, trying to find space in the metal jungle that rattled through the underground tunnels. Among them sat Margaret Henderson, a 78-year-old woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore her favorite blue cardigan and carried a small leather purse that had belonged to her late husband. Margaret was heading to the bank to deposit her monthly pension check. More importantly, her purse contained irreplaceable treasures: photographs of her grandchildren, a letter from her son who lived overseas, her husband's wedding ring that she kept safe. In the corner seat, appearing as just another tired commuter, was Jason Statham. He wore a simple jacket and kept his head down, looking like any other passenger making his way to work. His sharp eyes, however, missed nothing. Near the middle of the car, Danny Martinez shifted nervously from foot to foot. At 22, he had made many poor choices in life. Today, desperation drove him forward. His younger sister needed expensive medication, and he had no money left. The elderly woman looked like an easy target, distracted and vulnerable. As the train lurched forward, Danny moved closer to Margaret. His hands trembled slightly as he approached her from behind. Other passengers were too absorbed in their phones or morning thoughts to notice what was happening. With practiced ease, Danny unzipped Margaret's purse and pulled out her wallet. His heart raced as he felt the thick stack of bills inside. Without a word or apology, he stepped back and moved toward the doors. The train screeched to a stop at Maple Street Station. Danny quickly exited, disappearing into the crowd on the platform. He never looked back. Margaret continued reading her book, unaware that her wallet was gone. She hummed softly to herself, thinking about meeting her neighbor for tea later that afternoon. Jason's eyes followed Danny as he left the train. His expression remained neutral, but something had shifted in his posture. The quiet passenger was now fully alert. The train doors closed, and the journey continued. No idea that her morning had just taken a devastating turn. Her life savings, her memories, everything precious to her was now in the hands of a stranger who had vanished into the city's endless stream of people. As the train moved deeper underground, 3 lives had just become forever connected by this single moment of theft. 3 stops later, Margaret decided it was time to get her bus transfer ticket from her wallet. She reached into her purse, expecting to find it easily, but her fingers met only fabric and loose items. Confused, she dug deeper, moving tissues and cough drops aside. "Where is it?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the ball. Trains rumbling. Her heart began to beat faster as she emptied the entire contents of her purse onto her lap. Lipstick, reading glasses, a small handkerchief, and her phone lay scattered before her, but no wallet. Panic started to creep up her spine like cold water. "Oh my goodness," Margaret gasped. Finally understanding what had happened, the other passengers nearby turned to look at the elderly woman, who was now frantically searching through her bag. A young mother with a toddler offered a sympathetic smile, while a businessman checked his watch impatiently. Margaret's hands shook as she realized her wallet was truly gone. All her money, her identification cards, her precious photographs, everything was lost. Tears began to well up in her eyes, but she tried to hold them back, not wanting to cause a scene. Jason Statham had been watching the entire situation unfold. He observed Margaret's growing distress with concern. When she started crying quietly, something inside him stirred. He had seen many things in his past life, but witnessing an innocent elderly woman's despair touched something deep within him. The train pulled into Central Station, and Margaret quickly gathered her belongings, preparing to exit. She needed to get to the bank and cancel her cards before the thief could use them. More importantly, she needed to call her son and explain what had happened to his late father's ring. As Margaret stood near the doors, still visibly shaken, Jason approached her quietly. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked gently, his voice calm and reassuring. Margaret looked up at the stranger, surprised by his kindness. Most people in the city hurried past those in need. "I've been robbed," she said, her voice cracking. "My wallet was stolen on the train." Jason's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Do you remember when?" About 10 minutes ago, I think. I didn't even notice until now. The train doors opened and passengers began to file out. Jason made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing his regular commute, he knew he had to help this woman. "Which station did you get on?" he asked. "Riverside Station," Margaret replied, puzzled by this stranger's interest. Jason nodded and pulled out his phone. It was time to put his unique skills to use for something good. He had seen the thief's face, and he remembered every detail. Danny Martinez burst through the subway station exit and into the busy morning sunlight. His heart was still pounding from the adrenaline rush of the theft. He clutched Margaret's wallet tightly in his jacket pocket, already planning which bank he would hit first. The streets were crowded with people rushing to work.
Oh yeah, just like him, except he wasn't going to work.
He was going to save his sister's life. The wallet felt heavy with promise as he walked quickly toward the nearest ATM. Unbeknownst to Danny, Jason Statham was already in motion. Within minutes of Margaret's discovery, he had accessed the subway security system using his old contacts. The grainy black and white footage showed everything: Danny's approach, the swift theft, and his exit at Maple Street Station. Jason studied the young thief's face on the screen. Danny looked desperate, not evil. There was fear in his eyes, the kind that came from having no other options. This wasn't a career criminal. This was someone pushed to the edge. Margaret sat on a bench in the subway station, still trying to process what had happened. A kind transit officer had offered her some tissues and contacted the police. She kept touching her empty purse, as if somehow the wallet would magically reappear. "The officers will do their best, ma'am," the officer said gently. "But you should know that recovery rates for these crimes are quite low." Margaret nodded, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. She felt so vulnerable, so foolish for not being more careful. Meanwhile, Jason was already 2 blocks away from the subway station, moving through the crowd like a shadow. His military training kicked in automatically, observing faces, tracking movements, predicting patterns. Danny had a 20-minute head start, but Jason knew how thieves operated. Danny stopped at a coffee cart, using some of the stolen cash to buy a drink. His hands were still shaking. He tried to convince himself he was doing the right thing, that his sister would understand. The barista, a college student named Sarah, noticed his nervous energy, but thought nothing of it. "Heavy morning?" she asked with a friendly smile. "You could say that," Danny replied, forcing a laugh. Jason spotted them from across the street. He watched Danny interact with the young woman, noting how the thief couldn't maintain eye contact. Interesting. Most criminals were more confident. Danny continued his journey toward the financial district, where he planned to cash the check. He didn't know that Jason was now only 3 minutes behind him, tracking his every move. The chase was on, but this wasn't just about recovering stolen property anymore. Jason could see that Danny was a young man caught in a terrible situation. The question now was, how far would he go to help both the victim and the victimizer? They both moved through the bustling city streets. Their paths were converging toward an inevitable confrontation that would test them both in ways they never expected. Danny stood outside First National Bank, staring at the glass doors with a mixture of hope and terror. Margaret's check was made out to cash, which meant he could get the full amount immediately. His sister's medication cost exactly $750. This check was for $800. He took a deep breath and entered the bank. The familiar scent of fresh coffee and paper filled his nostrils. Customers waited in neat lines, and a security guard watched the entrance with bored eyes. Danny approached the teller window, trying to appear casual. The young woman behind the counter smiled professionally. "How can I help you today?" she asked. "I'd like to cash this check," Danny said, sliding Margaret's check across the counter. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. The teller, Lisa, examined the check carefully. Large amounts always required extra attention. She noticed it was made out to cash and glanced at Danny's nervous expression. "Can I see some identification, please?" Danny's heart skipped. He'd forgotten about that. Margaret's driver's license was in the wallet, but using it would be risky. What if she had already reported it stolen? I left my ID at home," he stammered. "I was in a hurry this morning." Lisa frowned slightly. Bank policy required identification for checks over $500. She was about to refuse the transaction when her manager approached. "Everything all right here, Lisa? This gentleman wants to cash a check without ID," she explained quietly. The manager, Mr. Peterson, looked at Danny with kind but suspicious eyes. "I'm afraid we can't proceed without proper identification. Perhaps you could come back later with your ID." Danny's face fell. His plan was falling apart. He mumbled an apology and quickly left the bank, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on his shoulders. Outside, Jason watched from across the street as Danny emerged from the bank looking defeated. He had been waiting patiently, knowing that desperation often drove people to make poor decisions in broad daylight. Jason crossed the street and entered the bank. He approached a different teller and asked to speak with the manager. "Excuse me," Jason said politely to Mr. Peterson. "I believe you just had a young man here trying to cash a stolen check." Mr. Peterson looked surprised. "How do you know about that?" Jason pulled out his phone and showed him a photo of Danny. "Because I've been tracking him since he stole from an elderly woman on the subway. Her name is Margaret Henderson, and that check belongs to her." The manager's expression changed from curiosity to concern. "You're with law enforcement?" "Something like that," Jason replied. "Where did he go?" Mr. Peterson pointed toward the street. "He left about 5 minutes ago. Looked pretty upset." Jason nodded and headed outside. He knew Danny would try again somewhere else, but now he understood the young man's motivation. This wasn't about greed. It was about saving someone he loved. The chase continued, but Jason found himself respecting Danny's determination even as he pursued him through the city streets. Danny sat on a park bench, his head in his hands. The wallet felt like a curse now, heavy with guilt and disappointment. He had been so focused on getting the money that he hadn't thought about what would happen next. Every bank he approached would require identification, and using Margaret's ID would only make things worse. A pigeon landed nearby, pecking at crumbs on the ground. Danny watched it absently, thinking about his sister Emma lying in her hospital bed. She was only 16, too young to fight leukemia alone. Their parents had died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving him as her only family. "Excuse me," a calm voice said behind him. Danny turned to see a man in a simple jacket standing a few feet away. Something about his presence made Danny's instincts scream danger. This wasn't a random encounter. "Did you follow me?" Danny asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jason Statham sat down on the bench beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. "Yes, I did. My name is Jason. I know about your sister." Danny's face went pale. "How do you— I've been watching you since you took that wallet from the elderly woman on the train." Jason's voice remained gentle, non-threatening. "I know why you did it." The young man's shoulders began to shake. "Please don't call the police. My sister, she needs that medicine." "I didn't know what else to do." "Not here to arrest you," Jason said quietly. "I'm here to help you understand that stealing isn't the answer." Danny looked up, tears in his eyes. "Then what am I supposed to do? Watch her die while I sit here with empty pockets?" Jason studied the desperate young man beside him. He saw himself at that age willing to do anything for family, making choices that seemed right in the moment, but led to years of regret. "What's her name?" Jason asked. Emma Martinez. She's at St. Mary's Hospital." Jason pulled out his phone and made a quick call. After a brief conversation, he hung up and turned back to Danny. "There's a better way," he said. "I know people who help families in situations like yours. You don't have to do this alone." Danny shook his head. "Even if that's true, I still stole from that nice lady. I took her money, her photos, everything precious to her. She's an elderly woman named Margaret Henderson. She's scared and upset right now, but she's safe. She would probably understand why you did what you did." The two sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city continuing around them. Danny finally reached into his pocket and pulled out Margaret's wallet. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he whispered, handing it over. Jason took the wallet gently. "I know you didn't, but now it's time to make things right." Jason and Danny walked slowly toward St. Mary's Hospital, the wallet safely tucked in Jason's jacket pocket. The young man kept his hands in his pockets, unsure what awaited him at the end of this journey. "You called someone?" Danny said quietly. "Who did you call?" "A friend who works with medical charities," Jason replied. "She's going to look into your sister's case. There are programs that help families with medical expenses, but you have to apply properly." Danny nodded, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in weeks. "And Margaret? What about her?" "We're going to see her next," Jason said. "But first, let's focus on your sister." At the hospital, they found Emma Martinez in room 304. The 16-year-old girl looked fragile in her hospital bed, her dark hair contrasting sharply with her pale skin. Tubes and machines surrounded her, but her eyes lit up when she saw her brother. "Danny," she whispered weakly, "you came back." "Of course I came back," he said, taking her small hand in his. "How are you feeling today?" "Tired," she admitted. "But the doctor says the new treatment is working." "Did you get the medicine?" Danny's face fell, and he glanced at Jason, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Emma, there's someone here who wants to meet you," Danny said. "This is Jason. He's helping us." Emma looked at Jason with curious eyes. "Thank you for helping my brother. He worries about me too much." Jason smiled gently. "Family is worth worrying about." After spending some time with Emma, Jason pulled Danny aside. "The charity will cover her medical expenses for the next 6 months. You need to fill out some paperwork, but she'll get the treatment she needs." Danny's eyes filled with tears of relief. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just promise me you'll never steal again," Jason said. "There are always other options." An hour later, they arrived at Margaret's apartment building. The elderly woman was sitting in her living room when they knocked on her door. Her face showed a surprise when she saw the two men standing there. "Miss Henderson," Jason said gently. "I'm Jason, and this is Danny. We have something that belongs to you." Margaret's eyes widened as Jason handed her the wallet. She opened it quickly, checking to make sure everything was there. "My photos," she whispered, clutching the pictures of her family. "And my husband's ring." Danny stepped forward, his voice shaking with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Henderson. I was desperate. My sister is sick, and I didn't know what else to do." Margaret looked at the young man who had stolen from her. She saw the tears in his eyes and the genuine remorse on his face. "Come in," she said. "Finally, both of you. I think we have some things to discuss." 3 months later, Margaret Henderson sat in her favorite chair by the window, knitting a scarf for Emma Martinez. The unlikely friendship that had formed from a subway theft had blossomed into something beautiful and unexpected. Danny visited her every Sunday now, bringing fresh flowers from the market and updates about his sister's progress. Emma's treatment was working better than anyone had hoped, and the doctors were optimistic about her recovery. "Mrs. Henderson," Danny said as he entered her apartment with his usual warm smile, "Emma wanted me to give you this." He handed her a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside was a handmade bracelet crafted from colorful beads. Emma's way of saying thank you for the care packages Margaret sent to the hospital. Margaret's eyes twinkled as she held the gift. "Tell Emma I love it, and tell her I'm proud of her." Progress. Jason appeared in the doorway, having just returned from his morning jog. Since that day on the subway, he had become an unexpected guardian angel for both Margaret and the Martinez family. His military pension provided him with the means to help quietly without drawing attention. The charity approved full coverage. For Emma's treatment, Jason announced, "She won't have to worry about medical bills for the next 2 years." Margaret set down her knitting and looked at both young men who had changed her life. "You know, when I was robbed that day, I thought my world had ended. I felt so alone and violated." Danny's face reddened with shame. "I'm still so sorry about that, Mrs. Henderson. I can't apologize enough." "But you did apologize," Margaret said gently. "And more importantly, you made amends. That young man who came to my door that day was not the same person who stole from me on the train." Oh, she paused, looking at each of them with affection. "You both taught me that there's good in everyone, even when circumstances make them do bad things." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward." Emma's recovery continued to improve, and she was scheduled to come home from the hospital next month. Danny had found a steady job at a local auto shop, and Margaret had offered to help him with his education once Emma was well. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, the three of them sat together like family. Margaret realized that sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways a simple subway ride had brought. Her the family she never knew she needed. The thief who had once frightened her had become her protector, and the stranger who had witnessed it all had become her friend. Life, she decided, was full of wonderful surprises. "Tea?" she asked, heading toward the kitchen. "Please," both men replied in unison, laughing at their synchronized response. Some stories begin with crime and end with punishment, but this story began with desperation and ended with hope, proving that redemption is always possible when people choose kindness over judgment.